finale. Right?
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I agreed to do this, but what I said was that I was not going to come in here with an agenda, and that this had to be an open question and answer session. So this is going to be entirely dependent on you guys asking interesting questions, and I will do my best to answer them. So yeah, so how would you all like to start this off? Yes, Carmen.
Tell us why you're here. What in your life made you be here answering questions?
Right now?
Little life story.
Oh no, come on, man. So I guess the reason I'm here is I love horses, first off. And I'm originally from Hawaii. I'm from Oahu. And I started riding when I was 7 years old. I did everything. I did Western and Pony Club and jumped a lot and trail rode and rode bareback and used to work polo ponies, and I got involved with dressage pretty early. I got to shareboard a full Arabian gelding when I was like 9 and started riding dressage with at the time one of the best trainers on the island, and I was hooked very early on. And by the time I was really 13, 14, I was working on the weekends for trainers on the island and doing stuff and making money that way. And when I was 15, I homeschooled for a year and a half and did more working at the barn so I could do what I wanted to do with that and the training. And as soon as I graduated high school when I was 17, I actually had two options. I was either going to go directly into reining or I was going to go into dressage. And the dressage trainer called me back first. So that's why, yes, so that's how I ended up doing this stuff. But I left home and I did not get a college education. My parents were not very happy with me about that, but I did not call them and ask them for any money. So they couldn't do anything about the fact that I ran off to be a horse trainer. And I worked my way from starting in Arizona. I went to Arizona, then Texas, then Kansas City, and then I met somebody who had a farm in Kansas City on Appaloosa Circle, and was doing some work for her. And I said I was going to come to Wellington for a month, and ended up staying for 2 months. And she happened to be leasing her arena to Sue Blinks, and that was in 2001, the winter of 2001. So right after the Sydney Olympics. Sue was untouchable at that point, right? Coming off of Sydney. I was terrified of her. I did everything I could to not ride when she was in the arena because I didn't want to be riding with Sue Blinks. I got a job working for Lauren Samus, who was right down the street, and at that time she was selling horses with Jochen Marl, and kind of fell straight into the, frying pan and straight into the fire with that. But I brought with me a horse at that time that I had on consignment from Texas, a kind of a difficult mare. And the one time I had to ride with Sue in the arena, which was just dreadful, she saw the mare and she liked the mare. And so she approached me about this horse, and is it for sale? And I said, yes, she's for sale. I have her here on consignment. Well, I would like my working student to try her. I said, okay, Sue, that's no problem. So we did that. It wasn't the right match. It was a very strong-willed mare. And then Sue came and tracked me down in Lauren Samus's barn and said, I want to try the mare. And I want to try the mare as many times as I want. I want to see you show her. I want to haul her off campus. I want my vet to pre-vet her. And the list went, and I want to hack her. And it just kept going and going and going. And I said, okay, Sue, I want a lesson. Right? Because if you're going to do all that, then the least you can do is maybe give me a lesson. I'm happy to pay for it, but I would like a lesson. So I think she was quite taken aback. And she gave me the lesson. And at the end of the said lesson, she offered me a job. So, right, but this is how these things evolve. So at the time, I was married. I don't want to go into that. It's so far long ago that it's dead to me. But I had to go back to Kansas City and straighten some things out. And I also, that client that had the farm was really she still is like a fairy godmother to me. And she let me take her FEI horse and make a run at Young Riders for Region 4. And I was 21 at the time, so it was like literally the last chance I had. And I did make the team. And the team that I was on was Felicia Chandler, sound familiar? David Marcus, and Mandy. So, and Mandy passed away a couple years ago, so that was like, it's for all of us, it's really, but you know, you never know who you'll meet when you do these things, and it's pretty special because now, 20 years later, David and I are quite close and work together, and Felicia I would consider a good friend, and it's special. You know, so I did Young Riders, was like second to last. You know, thanks Axel Steiner. My horse barely passed the jog. No, literally, like all the judges got in the runway, and Neil Ishoy told me to run them over the next time they do that. That's not a good plan, by the way. Don't run the judges over. And then, you know, Axel, you know, trot. 4 right hind, 4 right hind, 4. I wish she had blown me out because the horse had an injury. But so finished that out, and then I came to work for Sue Blinks, and I had not a whole lot of money, and I was riding at the time a 4-year-old half saddlebred, half Hanoverian gelding, called him Saddlevarian. It's a very special Kansas City breed, and I had another fairy godmother purchased the horse for me for $5,000, and that way I had something to bring with me to train with Sue. And I can still remember getting down here, and Sue's like, okay, pull him out and trot him up. And you know, if anyone has any experience with saddlebreds, the necks are here, the backs are like this, and then the croup is up here, and his hind legs were somewhere outside of Wellington. So, you know, but Sue's like, okay, we'll train it. And I have to say that I got such a good education from her. And still to this day, like the training that I got when I was that age with her formed me for the rest of my career, because she is the queen of connection, and you do not skip steps. So I think for the first year and a half, my horse didn't look like he was doing a whole lot, even though he was learning to piaffe and some other things. It was all about getting this rolled up saddlebred neck and not using his back and not wanting to touch the bit to like reach to the connection and push through from his hind legs to the bit properly. And what I learned from that process is that, it took about a year and a half, but then the horse learned everything else in 6 months. Because he had the top line to do it, and he had the understanding, and the infrastructure was so good. So like that to me is something that's really, really important. And I went, you know, at the time Sue qualified for the World Equestrian Games in Jerez, and I went with her up to Gladstone. We were living with Michael Barrisone. That's how I met Michael and Vera. And off to Europe, we were all living at Klaus Balkenhal's and doing the shows there. That's when I met Debbie McDonald, right? Lisa Wilcox, Christine Traurig, Günther Seidel, George, except I met George earlier because of Young Riders. But all these people are still very important in my life now, 20 years later, and it made a big impression on me back then to be that young. I'd never been out of the country. I had to get a passport so I could go out to groom for Sue. And Sue was, I thought, very protective of me in some ways. You know, she did not refer to me as a groom. She referred to me as a lehrling, right? So like, I'm a learner, I'm there. So that kind of gave me a little bit more, just maybe that much more status than just a normal groom. But she tried to give me riding opportunities. Gunter let me ride one of his crazy horses when I was there too. So like it wasn't that I was just there, sitting around, but to be on the back side of things and to be traveling with the team and seeing it from the back end, that really gave me a good understanding of if I want to ride at that level, what does that mean? And what does that take? And what does that look like? And let me tell you, those tours never go the way we think they're going to go. There's something always going wrong all the time. And the people that are managing the best are the ones that are the steadiest. They have the best team with them, and they're able to problem solve on the fly. And then you got to get a little lucky, right, with horses. So, but to go with the U.S. team, we got a team silver medal. It was a big deal, right? And then come back, and on the back side of that trip, Sue had never let me on Flim Flam, with good reason, because he was a girthy, cold-backed weirdo. And he was at the fittest part of his life, and when we got back to Klaus's, she told me I had to ride him for the vet. And I was pretty sure I was going to die. It was going to be one of those, like, you're either going to be able to tack him up and get on him, or you're just going to die. And I did get on him, and I still have a photograph of me on him at Klaus's ring. But Sue let me have quite a few riding opportunities, and really, for me, was just unbelievably instrumental in sending me on a path and what the standard had to be for that path. So, and after I worked for Sue full-time for a year and a half, and then part-time for another year and a half, and I was freelancing in Wellington. And I used to, when you're that age, I used to write a lot of naughty stuff, because that's what you get. Gary Smith, everybody remember Gary Smith? Right, so Gary would call me and be like, all right, Allie, it's nearly okay, time for you. So I was like the bridge rider. So if it was really bad, I went to Gary, and then once Gary thought it was mostly okay, but still probably bad, I got it. And then once it was basically okay, it got turned back over to its owner or whatever. So I did a lot of that. And then when Sue moved to California, the Kundrins offered me a job, a full-time job working for them. And I was surprised, because I was quite young. I was 24. And Sue also asked me to go to California with her. So then I was really torn about that. And the Saddle Variant, I had sold him that summer and made some money on him. I paid my fairy godmother back the $5,000 that she gave me, and then kept the rest. And Sue was like, we can take that money and I'll match it, and I'll help you find a horse and come into California with me. And then I had another job offer in Texas at the time too, and they were like, listen kid, we're going to give you $50,000 a year. There's your barn, there's your house, we'll pay you commissions. And so it was a lot, but I ended up going to work for Fritz and Claudine, because I knew it was the closest chance I would get to being able to ride really high quality horses, and that they would pay for my education. So it was on me to learn how to train and how to ride and do this well, but that they would fund my dreams. And so it was very scary, but I said, yes, I'm gonna work for Fritz and Claudine. I've been with them now for, I think it's 18 years. Yeah, and I think too, what's really important, like the first thing we did was Fritz went out and got me a 5-year-old, right? because in his mind, it is the horses that the rider develops that really go, he thinks this is the best combination. So we've bought younger horses and then developed them. And the one that clearly has been the most impactful is Roosevelt. And that horse, it was interesting at the time. I had the 5-year-old that had developed. I had approached John Brink about coming to Sweden to train, and I had that horse, and I had this almost rescue horse from Spain that was an FEI horse that Claudine and I bought him because we were like, this is an amazing horse and they're going to kill him. So we did that because we just couldn't leave the horse there. And then Fritz bought Roosevelt off of video.
Oh,
Sue had gone and sat on him and went, yeah, nice horse, but kind of boring lines, Rotspawn, meh. And so I called Jan and I said, by the way, we have this coming 6-year-old stallion. Are you okay if we bring him too? And he was approved in Sweden and in Denmark, as well of course, Hanoverian. And Jan's like, absolutely, we'll stand him here. He can, be in the tool store program, and we'll do that. So the plan was, I met them over there. The plan was that, I'd ride him. I was going to be over there for 8 months or something, and get the training with my other horses, show some, and then with Rosie, he'd breed all season, and then I would take him home with me. Well, he had a hell of a time learning a flying change. And at first, it was my fault that he was not learning the flying change. And I went, okay. So Jan's like, you're going to ride this one, and I'm going to take him over and ride him. And the other one was also a 6-year-old stallion by Briare, and that one learned the changes like that. And Rosie just, no. It just wasn't happening, even with the great Jan Brink. So, we agreed to promote him. Jan showed him in the 6-year-old test with very late changes. And when it came time for me to go home, what I said to Fritz is, I said, he's a very popular breeding stallion in Sweden that doesn't have a flying change. And I don't know if the right thing is for me to try to bring it home and keep hammering on this, or do we just leave him there and see if Jan can sort it out? And if he can't, it doesn't matter because they're breeding and you can sell him that way. And so we left him. And Jan called me, I want to say maybe in April of his 7-year-old year, and said, I think it's going to be okay. I think it's going to be okay. So I went back to Sweden that summer for a couple months, took over the ride. Jan did the 7-year-old Prix St. George a couple times on him. It wasn't remarkable scores, 66, it wasn't amazing. Falsterbo more, but that's his show, right? So, right? Yeah. But we brought him home, and a little bit the rest is history. I showed him as an 8-year-old. In small tour, I can't remember. Isn't it terrible? It was in 2010. It's a long time ago when you think about it. But the horse showed very, very, very successfully down here. Prix St. George, I won, and then I started doing some CDIs. He won his Region 1. St. George, I won final stuff with me, and then I stopped showing him into the next season because I had basically made arrangements to go train with Kira Kirkland and her husband. And I wanted to start working towards the Grand Prix stuff and not try to muddy the waters trying to show the horse and work on the 1-tempies and this and that. And we had acquired another horse named Schumacher, and I don't know if anyone remembers that horse. I think he was 3rd in the World Young Horse Championships as a 5-year-old. That horse won as a 6-year-old here. I think every class I took him in with high scores. And then I won the international British 6-year-old championship at Hickstead during the 5-star show. That summer I was with Kira and Richard. But the thing about Rosie, and this is a really good story. So I said to Fritz, and Rosie I had made a Grand Prix horse by that point. Okay, so and put 1-tempies on probably a couple of horses, so it wasn't like I was a total newbie at it. And I said, oh yeah, don't worry, Fritz. I'll be showing this thing I2 by the end of summer, no problem. No problem. I didn't show that horse I2 until the year after, because it took a year plus to get the ones on him. And it was the most painful, traumatic, horrible learning experience of my life. But it was the best thing that ever happened to me because I have zero fear of 1-tempies, period. I know they will learn them. So I helped put them on an 18-year-old Frisian quarter horse cross 2 summers ago that the trainer had said it'll never do it. Well, he does them now. So, but because the horse was so difficult, and going through that process, it gave me an immense skill set of understanding of, why? How does this work, and what do we need to do to fix it? So in the end, it ended up making me very, very competent and very okay with the process, where I think people get super impatient and you just can't rush that stuff. The horses will get it if you just, be a little creative, have a good quality canter, have all the pieces in line, and then just be patient with it. They will get it. And Rosie was also difficult because he was kind of a slug as a small tour horse. He was a little bit of a lazy stallion. And as soon as we started finding that one Tempe place, and then also really starting to get him in the Piaffe, like he always had good talent for Piaffe as a young horse and everything else. Not so much Passage. That took a little more energy from his hind legs, but he found what I call that internal fire that you really need in an FEI Grand Prix horse. Like, he could get and he was cold-backed anyways. So, his go-to when he was nervous or when things got exciting was I called it spronging. He'd like kind of buck and like prong around. Yes. And that made it a little bit tricky to show, because I spent a lot of time eating a lot of shit on that horse, which is fine. Like, not as far as getting thrown, but you think you have it, and then you go in and your horse gets tight and nervous and doesn't want to go forward, and then you're on 80 for the trot tour, and then you're on 35 for the canter tour because he's bucking through the whole thing. And I had to ride through it because I couldn't replicate it necessarily at home. And that was also in a way a really good learning thing for me, because it wasn't like it was just this magnificent straight shot to the Olympics. No, it wasn't. It was painful. And I give that horse so much credit, because you have to be strong enough to go, I don't really care about the scores. I don't care about the scores. This horse needs an experience, and I'm going to have to give it to him, whether I like it or not, right? Until he knows his job, because I know he can do it. Like, deep down, we knew he had enough heat, and then it was just about kind of like taming the dragon a little bit. So I spent a lot of time in the back rings working stuff out, and that was okay. And it all started to kind of come together in 2014. I took him to dressage at Lexington, and I think I got I don't know, it was something like a 73.5 in a National Grand Prix class without a whip, and then something stupid like a 77 in a freestyle, which doesn't sound very high now, but guess what? Back then it was, right? And then I went, oh yeah, I think the horse is ready for Devon. So then we went to Devon, and I was the first one in for the Grand Prix. Boom, we won it. And with I don't know, JJ, you were there. What was it? You don't remember either. We're so old. I don't know. It was over 70. It was like a solid boom. And then he won the special as well on, I think, 71, something like that. But that was sort of the coming out show where everyone's like, oh, where'd she come from? Well, guess what? I've been here a long time working stuff out in the back rings. That girl with the stallion that's going, that was me. So, but, and then from there, that really, then sort of we knew that, okay, we've got this. And then he came down to Wellington, and the first CDI right out of the gate, he won that. And I think that kind of made everyone go, uh-oh, there is a new kid in town. And then you have to have a lot of strategy with this stuff if you're going to be on the team or want to aim for the team. And it was 2015. We had to get a gold medal at the Pan Ams. Otherwise, we weren't going to Rio because we didn't qualify at the World Equestrian Games in 2014. So we were going to send the strongest team possible. And at the time, the strongest team possible was Stefan and Laura in the Grand Prix slots, and Kim Herslow and Sabine in the Prix St. George slots. And we went over to Europe on that tour to duke it out, and that was, for me, the first time that I had been on a tour with the team. It was fantastic. We had the best group of people. It was so fun. We went to Munich and then to show there at the 5-star, and then we had our head-to-head was at Achleiten. Laura stayed home because she basically had proven herself in 2014 and wanted to save the horse, and that was also the right decision. But again, that tour, I made friends for the rest of my life. You know, we're just thick as thieves, and that's how these things are supposed to be. They're supposed to be fun and bonding and an incredible experience of your life. They're not supposed to be miserable. Okay, so, and we ended up being named the reserve for Laura. So, and Olivia, who's a dear friend of mine, was named the reserve for the Smile Tour riders. So she and I packed our horses up and drove up to Toronto and waited that out, and then came home and then came up with a plan for the next year. And then qualifying for Rio, you know, again, things don't always go how you think they're supposed to go. Robert had asked me to go to Washington, D.C. and do that big jumper show there and do a freestyle. And I'm like, Robert, my horse is going to kill me. Like, he does not like going under the lights, and he does not like loud music. And he's like, no, he's not the horse he was even 6 months ago. You need to go do this. So I went and I did that, and it was a good experience. And came back. And I had a really bad freestyle experience for the Pan Ams where he lost his mind in there. Like the kind where everyone's going, I'm not sure she's going to stay on. Like I was that guy with Rosie in 2015. And, you know, you learn, and we tweaked the music. We got it much quieter. We were very careful about stuff. And I used to do these, you know, multiple one-tempies into a double pirouette, and all that was fine until all of a sudden in my special in the 5-star, I couldn't stop the one-tempies. And so we're just one-temping into, I'm like, oh God, we're way past 9 now. Please stop, because we're turning now for this pirouette. And you know, he wasn't trying to be bad. He had learned something that I had asked him to do in another situation. Yeah, and the one-tempies were very hard for him to learn, and I think he just thought he was doing me a favor by doing more. But like that was a moment too where we were under pressure to show the horse immediately the next week, and my coach at the time, Michael Barrison, and I made a decision to pull the horse out for 3 weeks. And that made everyone very nervous. But I said, I've got to be able to turn these one-tempies off. So we took the horse home and we trained on him until there was an on and an off button. And then he went out and he won the next Grand Prix on 74, and he won a special on 74, and that's what we went to Europe on. And then again too, the tour over there was incredible. I mean, that was a once in a lifetime experience, just because you'll never have the same people necessarily, but it was an incredible experience, and we're all still super close. You know, Casey, Laura, and I, we work together. I love Stefan. You know, it was again a super special environment, and I think because of that, I have an incredibly high standard and expectation of what it should be to be on a team, what the environment should be like. You know, what it's got to feel like in the barn, because it was really wonderful. And you know, those kind of experiences change your life forever. So that's why I'm here, Carmen, I think 7 years later. That's how that question got started. So can we go on to something else now that they know all of my life up to that point?
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Does anyone have another question?
Where's Roosevelt now?
He is in Virginia at the Kunrens farm. He's retired. He did a little bit of breeding, and then Fritz was like, meh, he's done. He's very happy. I think the worst thing about it is that when you have a horse like that in your life every day for years, it's hard to not have them in your life every day still. So, but I think I suffer more than him. And that's the way it should be. So, yeah. Yes?
What are your plans for the future?
Oh, that's also another complicated question. But like maybe then leaving, like after Rio, Rosie was hurt, and he was hurt. We knew he was hurt. I mean, the vets were literally, we had to fly back to Europe before we could fly back to the US because of quarantine stuff, and we literally had somebody there checking the horses when they got unloaded in the barn at midnight, and he had a soft tissue injury. And so it wasn't like I was able to land off that and then just go right into, I wanted to do Aachen. Like, there were things for me personally that I would, as a rider, love to do. And, so I had to take a step back. We had also purchased a 5-year-old mare while I was over there. I brought her back with me, and that mare ended up, we got back in September, like the end of August, something like that. She ended up colicking, doing weird, strange things, and couldn't figure it out, and that mare ended up dying after a second colic surgery. She had an 8.5-pound tumor near the base of her heart, so it was impinging her vagus nerve and making her colic, and and that was like one of those, as a horse person, she was an unbelievably sweet, talented, lovable mare, and it was just devastating to me, like just devastating that this young horse just, and and the reality was she was going to die whether we bought her or not, but it just happened that we bought her, and that tumor grew and grew and grew till it was, and you couldn't see it from the outside, like you couldn't scanning, and you couldn't find it. So that really, between him being hurt and her dying, I was pretty shook up. And we did start going and looking for more young horses, which we did buy a few 5-year-olds, and we also purchased what I'd call a half-baked 9-year-old mare that was, still is, she's an extremely talented horse, but we imported her, and I flew over to pick her up in Amsterdam, and she was covered in hives. And I went, that's not good. And then, we got her to Virginia. She seemed fine in the quarantine barn. When she finished quarantine, we moved her out of that barn. Flowers everywhere, hives, fever, like the kind of hives that are this big, not like little hives. And that one, we spent 6 months. We brought her down to Florida. It was even worse. And I honestly, I sent her back to Europe to be sold. I'm like, I'm killing this horse, and I'm not doing it. Like, if the goal is that this mare's supposed to load up and ship around the world, she can't handle it. Or she can't handle being an American, right? To an American FEI horse, that we know these horses have to get on a plane and ship every year. So, and we were very fortunate with that. She was resold into a very good program, and all is well with that. But that also was for me a big blow, because I thought, wow, I finally found something that I can, that's just a little bit older, so I can start picking away at some stuff. I have a couple young horses, and then that happened too. And I met my husband right after Rio, and that was also different because I was used to not having anyone else in my life, and I just ran it how I wanted to run it and didn't think about anyone else. And when I met Tony, he has a daughter, and at the time, Kamaya must have been, she was 6.5. So, it changed my life to meet somebody that I wanted to actually be around all the time. That's kind of a weird thing for a horse girl, right? You're like, ooh, I have to stay with you all the time here. And I did go up and down a couple years back to Virginia, and then it just became not in a way what I wanted to do for myself personally. So I'm down here full time, and again, I still work for the Kundrens, and I do have a couple of their horses now, and we are looking for more horses. So I'm in this kind of funny place where I'm coaching and teaching and training a lot. But I also, if it was the right horse, I would put the white pants on again, and then everybody better watch out. But it would have to be really that, because I think ultimately for me, I think it's very important to compete. I think, especially as a trainer, I think it's important to show, hey, I can do this on the spot, under pressure, in a different environment. I think that's important, and I think I always get a little nervous when people haven't done it and then want to say they can do it better. I'm like, go ahead. because it's real hard. It's real hard. But I also, it's not what makes me like wake up every day. I don't sit there and burn to go to the horse show. I burn to train and to teach. That's what motivates me. And that was also too a big driver for me, even going to the Olympics. I knew that if I could do that and was successful on that level, I would have a platform to work off of and do what I really want to do. And I'm very involved with D4K. You know, I'm very interested in those programs, and you know, I am very happy being a support system for other professionals and for young professionals and kids coming up. So they asked me to chef that U25 team, the second team, for the first time. They are looking to start putting people like myself in other positions, because we are a huge country, you know, and I'm part of the coaching support network for the Federation as well. So it's, that stuff really motivates me, you know, and I love seeing, like, when horses understand something, that for me, I love that, and I feel the same way when a student does. So that's kind of where I'm at with that stuff. Yes?
When you're campaigning a horse like Rosie, or you're coaching these students like Laura and everybody that you're helping, are you the sole rider, or do you ever have a trainer get on your horse? Like,
Oh, absolutely.
Did you ever ride Rosie?
Yes.
Did you ride some of your top
So
riders?
he was tricky because he was cold-backed. And so for a long time when he was younger, I rode him because it was a liability. And I didn't want to put anyone in a situation that was maybe not okay. But absolutely, Kira helped me sort out those one-tempies. I didn't have the skill set to do it myself. And that was one of the most painful things for me, to like swallow that and say, I've got to step off this horse and let her help me sort it out, because I don't know what I'm doing and I'm at the end of my limit here. But now I think too, it's interesting, like I'm way more happy now because I've maybe proven myself. I don't carry the same chip on my shoulder, you know, that, you know, I have to do it all myself. I was very much that way. I'm way more open to, I think it's actually great when other people get on, because then they can give me better feedback. You know, I try to ride my students' horses when I can, because again, it helps me understand what's going on. And as he got older, he got much safer, and then it was okay. But he was just a little tricky that way. And I don't think it's worth getting anyone killed over. You know, or like taking the risk of him also having a bad experience because they didn't read him right and kicked him in the wrong moment. Yeah. He got much, I even put Claudine on him at the end and let her trot around on him and stuff. But, you know, he was 16.
Yeah. But like the actual, like with training, you had other people?
Not really.
Just for the one.
Michael sat on him a total of one time, because he was going to get him to passage more. It didn't happen. Nope, it didn't happen. No, once I took him over, it was mostly me. And then that moment, and then of course Kira's husband too would get on him here and there as well and help with that. But no, it was mostly. I think that's also pretty normal. Because a lot of those top horses are weird. Right? And they're just, no, they are. They have to have a little bit, they got to be a little eccentric to do what they do. And then you got to be real careful who gets on them.
How long did it take to have Kira help you get through the ones?
I want to say that she got stuff ironed out in a couple weeks.
Wow.
No, that's not him doing 15, people. What I'm saying is that's him starting to do a series without bucking, you know?
Bucking or sprawling?
Both. So, but you know, and then from that point it just built. But I want to say it was about 2 weeks, and then she started putting me back on him to feel it, to be like, this is what you're looking for. And I was like, oh. Now I understand why it wasn't working the other way, because I was doing everything wrong, thinking I was doing it right.
And was it just her timing or her feeling speed? Like what
Well, she is unbelievably experienced, right? But with him, what ended up having to happen with him, this is going to sound very unclassical to people, but he needed to be almost taken on the right rein and lifted like this. So he was above the bit, left rein empty, and figured out the balance like that. Okay? So that's not very, you're not going to find that in a manual anywhere. And if you saw them at the end, they were dead straight, perfectly even into the contact, very small aid, but it had to start there because his gut instinct was to put his head between his knees and start bucking or spronging. So, and she's so clever, and she's done it on so many horses and so many different types of horses. She got on and sort of felt the canter and went, "Oh, you need to be in this balance," and go, and that helped get him ironed out. So, and I always appreciate that about them. Like, I was always sure, because he was just tricky enough that if I had gone elsewhere, I'm not sure he would have gotten sorted out. They would have been like, "Give up, kid. It's not going to be a Grand Prix horse." And Kieran Richard were just like, "Oh, we'll just pick away at it, and we'll get a train no matter what." So I really respect and appreciate that about them.
Hi. What is some of the wisdom that you learned from Sue Blinks when you were young that's like part of your teaching now that you can share?
Connection is everything. Everything. So hind legs over the back to the bridle, and the horse has to be equally supple both directions. And no pulling. No. Out to the hand. Like really Schultenbaumer, that classical system that way. But the biggest thing probably for me too about Sue was she is one of the most detail-oriented professionals I've ever worked with, and she sees everything, and you are not allowed to cheat. She knows if that horse is half a pound lighter on the one rein, even if you think the rein looks filled up and she can't see, she knows. She knows if it's not straight, and she was just relentless about it. But having that kind of education when I was so young made me go, "Oh my, I don't really know how to ride any other way." And I did, the benefit, I was with her for 3 years, and then I was training with Jan Brink for not quite the same amount of time, but enough time to be into his system, so completely understanding of his system. And then I was with Kieran Richard long enough to understand their system completely. And so I feel like the education that I've gotten from those three individuals in particular, you can use things from everybody and then you make it your own system, but there must be a system, and it has to be simple. So that was really, she is the queen of connection, and she was still calling me in to get on her horses here and there, and every time I get on one of her horses, I'm like, God, this is the best trained horse I've ever ridden, because it is even and straight and supple, and I know the book, like I know textbook. If I apply my aids this way, this horse is going to do this because she has trained it. So that's, she's very special that way. Yeah. Anyone else? Wow. Yes, Carmen.
So besides the regular training, do you do something mental for mental strength? I remember you many years ago, you used to suffer in social environments.
Oh yeah, I don't
and
like.
Now look
yeah,
at you.
No. I actually more than suffer. I struggled with depression for a long time, and as a kid, and then everything else, and I sort of hit a crisis point when I was 30 and realized that I actually had to do something about it. And I started therapy with an Olympic grade sports psychologist who I came in and started talking to him about my competing and this and that, and then he was like, "And tell me more." And by the end of the session, he said, I don't think the competing's your problem, and he was right. So and the Kunrans paid for that, which was a massive gift from them to me, because that was also life-changing for me. I was in therapy with Dr. McCauley from 2010 until he passed away in 2021. And he died, he had a brain tumor, and he passed away pretty like, it was within 3 weeks of us knowing he had a problem, he was dead. And I used to joke with him, I used to say, listen man, I am not doing this with anyone else ever again, so you're never allowed to die. And then he went. But what I will say is that I learned really good coping mechanisms, and it was a safe spot for me to go and work stuff out and figure out how to deal with people, whether it's my employers or my friends or who I was dating at the time. And I wish everybody would do it, but it was much harder than going to the Olympics. And ironically, during the Olympics, I didn't speak to him at all, because again, it wasn't the competing that was my issue, and the time change was too hard. So the whole time I was over there, I was just footloose and fancy free. So, but just to give to be honest about that, I think that again, it was the best thing I ever did for myself, and I would strongly encourage anyone to do that work. But it is work. Yeah.
How old is your son now?
He is almost 20 months, and he's a monster. He's very cute when he's happy. No, he's super cute, but yeah, he's very strong-willed. No idea where that came from. Not a clue. So.
Can you talk a little bit about juggling motherhood with your career?
Yeah, it's rough. It's really rough. When I got pregnant, my husband had been working for UPS as a manager at PBI for 17 years or something like that. And he would get up and go to work at 3 a.m. so he could be done by noon, which was pretty miserable. And we had talked about him doing something else and maybe going into real estate or doing something else. And I got pregnant and I was like, okay, now you are going to do something else, because we're in the middle of COVID and I need to keep working safely as much as I can. And we agreed that he would be, I call him my house husband, but he's home with Noah full time. And he will go back to work when Noah's starting to go to some sort of schooling of some sort. But that's kind of the only way for me that I can kind of live with myself, is that my husband's home with him. And the tough part is that if you're somebody like me who's wired, I am a workaholic. I live to play with horses every day. That's all I want to do all day long. And there's a level of guilt that I always feel. Somebody is losing any given day, whether it's my family, my own personal horses, or my students, depending on what's going on. And so everyone's got to give a little, right? And that's how it works. And I just do the best I can, I also think kids can't grow up thinking they're the center of the universe either, right? So, he can't pick your parents, so, he's stuck with me, and too bad, you're the child of a horse trainer. So I do the best I can. So I get real protective of my time on Monday, if I can. But even that gets eaten up by calls for the Federation and stuff like that, or clinics or whatever. But I try as much as possible, if I can, I try to really put a boundary up with that.
So how do you decide? You have a lot of commitment to many of the federations, associations, and how do you decide when to say not so much because of your family and your work?
Well, so people accuse me of not saying no. I say no a lot, believe it or not. and I will time out with the federation as far as the AAC rep. I'll be done after Paris with that. And that, because I'm the AAC rep for equestrian, that puts me on the board of the federation, which puts me at the IDC, meetings, and there are a lot of things. And then I sit on the dressage sport committee. I also sit on the athlete working group for dressage. I was on the hearing committee at one point. I am still on the ethics committee. I was on the finance committee for the federation at one point too, and I have cut it down considerably. And the other thing, I'm also on para, that too, because they wanted able-bodied athletes on that. And when it gets to be too much, I just tell them I can't make the call. Fill me in. If it's that important, fill me in. And yeah, it's a lot. But the other part of this too is that we need athletes to step up and participate. If you want to steer the sport, do something about it. And I had said to Hallie after Rio, because they had done such a good job, again, it was an absolute privilege to be on the team with those guys. And I said to Hallie, if there's anything I can do, I need to pay it back, right? You guys did so much for me. What can I do? Oh, I know what you can do. But the first position was the equestrian AAC rep. And that position I'm voted in by my peers, which are 10-year athletes for dressage, eventing, and show jumping. And again, I will time out on that after Paris. But that has been a really interesting position, because I fly to these in-person meetings where I'm sitting with athlete reps from every sport, and then working with the US OPC. And the other interesting piece about that is that I got put in that position in the beginning of 2017, and 6 months into that position was when Larry Nassar shit hit. So the USO, at the time, USOC, blew up, right? Everything blew up when that happened. So it's been a real wild roller coaster ride on that, and that was also another reason, even though, I was pregnant, and knowing that I didn't have any more time, I agreed to do a second term, because there's too many things sort of in flux to just be like, oh, too bad, I don't have time for that. So the hope is that by the time I'm done through Paris, that whoever gets voted in next, they're going to be onboarded, because I wasn't. I had no idea how to do any of this stuff. And the USOPC AAC is the strongest it's ever been, literally. So it's quite interesting and critical stuff for sport. So then I feel like I can't say no to that type of thing. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
In your library at home, dressage library,
Yeah.
do you have one or two books that you sometimes just pull out?
I go through phases of that. I don't have one or two books. I think like most of us, we usually have 50 or 60 training books. And I'm always sort of looking around, and what's really happened to me though now, and I'm sure a lot of people will agree with this, before we had to go to books, right? Now we go to the internet, and then we watch a video. And I honestly find that, yes, I love the theory, and I think that's important, but it'll sink in more if I'm watching a video of it. Right? Because most of us are very visual. So, I feel like my book collection is amazing, but I don't go to it the way where I might go and go, I'm going to look at this online, and think of how many online training programs are available now. When I was a kid, there was maybe somebody's bootlegged VHS training tape, right? Well, Hawaii, who's going to have training videos in Hawaii, right? And then we would pass it around till it was dead. And that was what, and then magazines, right? That's what you did. And then clinics, that was, so now the world is your oyster. And when I talk to these young professionals coming up, I tell them that all the time. I'm like, man, you have one finger click and you've got everything right there. So that's sadly more what I do now. in my not spare time that I don't have. That doesn't exist. Yes. Anything else? Yeah.
With young riders, or not young riders, but people who are training amateurs, but they may not be Olympic, Olympic riders, or even the top shelf, but they're at the middle level.
The grassroots.
Yeah. What would you advise them training amateurs? What is one or two things that can help them understand the amateur rider, the rider who only has so much money for a certain horse or whatever? What take it?
Well, I'll tell you what I think is one of the biggest problems I see is that even if you're an amateur rider, you can learn to sit well. And I think that when people don't prioritize the seat, in a way, they're not doing anyone a favor. And you'll only get so far because you won't be sitting effectively. And that is, for me, when I go out and about and do clinics, I don't teach a whole lot of amateurs now anymore, but I still, I do occasionally. And even when I'm in a clinic situation, the first thing I usually do is work on their seat, because they might come in and tell me I want to work on flank changes and piaffe. And if they can't sit properly, I can't go there. Like, it's against my religion, right? Sue blinks, right? So I think that even on a limited budget with a limited horse, or that's the type of stuff that needs to be prioritized more than getting my bronze medal. If you really want to have a good relationship with your horse too, right? Because we talk about, as we're getting into, like, even leading into Paris, there's always discussion about should equestrian even be there anymore, and it becomes a welfare issue, right? And I think the best way to prevent stuff like that from happening is that it starts at the grassroots level, that everybody is learning to ride well and not just trying to go up the levels as quickly as possible. And the subject comes up all the time for the Federation about, should we raise the score threshold to do a freestyle? And the last time we tried to do it, we nearly all got decapitated, because it was made very clear to us that they don't care if the quality isn't good, they just want to go up the level. And that's a real problem. And I think that's gotta, it's a very difficult place, because we've also had discussions about holding the trainers accountable if their students are riding badly. And I'm thinking, well, that's not really fair. If somebody says, I want to ride 4th level, and I can't sit the trot, but they're going to do it, what do you do? I mean, trainers have to eat too. But I think for me, it's a cultural thing. Like in Germany, you can't do that, right? You have to earn the right to go up the levels. And I wish it was the same way here. It would mean a lot more. So that's kind of not answering your question, but that's how I sort of view things. Yeah.
What is your take on all the things we see now about leg wraps versus boots versus what is your practice, and has it changed with more recent research?
Yeah, I try to use an extremely light boot on my horses.
For heavy work, you just use boots?
Yeah. And some of them don't go in anything. So it depends on the horse.
And have you changed that?
Yeah.
Is that a new practice for you?
Probably in the last 3 years. Yeah. Unless I have something that's really whacking itself. Like I've got one horse I ride that will literally pull his shoes off left and right. He lives in bell boots. But I rehabbed that one back from a ligament injury and not in wraps.
So what caused the change in your thinking?
Well, I mean, if you're putting hot things on legs, and then the horses we're in Florida, and then you're putting something that's just absorbing sweat, so it's getting heavy and it's hot, what's the point? So just protect them from hitting themselves and then call it a day, for me. Everyone's welcome to do whatever they think is best. I'm not saying, but that's a little bit my thinking on it. Yeah.
You talked about with Sue Blinks that like what you learned from her was about connection. Can you talk about what you learned from Jan Brink?
System.
And also Kira.
Yeah. Jan, I think to this day, was one of the best show coaches I've ever had. I mean, he is unbelievably meticulous about the exercises and about how you approach things. It has to be the same way every time. And I can remember, getting over to Sweden, and we had signed up to go to a horse show, and I was PJ. I was running PJ through a Prix St. George, and he said, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to warm up in the indoor, and then we're going to come outside, and we're going to ride through your test. And I don't care how it goes, you're going to ride it just like you would at the horse show. And I went, okay. So I warm the horse up, take him outside, run through my test. I'm thinking, it wasn't that bad, like he got all his tempies, and I'm probably okay. And I'm done, and I walk up to Jan, and I say, what do you think? And he looks at me, and he says, you rode the first turn, so canter in, halt, trot off. He said, you rode the first turn like you don't care. And to this day, I can still feel my heart sinking, even saying that out loud, because I was like, oh my God, I do care, but he thinks that I don't, and that's a real problem. And that really, really changed things for me. It made me totally aware that every step matters. You have to be riding every step, and you have to be to feel it out and train how with every horse individually. What does that mean? Do you need to turn early? Do you need to come out of your corner a little bit sooner? He still is adamant. If you turn on for shoulder in, you don't waver ever. You might as well just die. Don't waver. Hold the line. Hold the line. But that kind of precision for me, it created such discipline, and really changed the way that I viewed competing and what it has to look like, and how to attack a test. Meticulous that way. And he's, still, he was just here. To me, it's the same. He is still the same than when I was there. And for me, it's very comforting, because I'm like, and I'm in the system. You just slide back in, and you're like, oh, this feels like home. And but that was really, for me, the way he does the exercises, the way he trains the horses, the thought process behind it. He doesn't do anything without a plan. You have a plan for everything. You have a plan for your warm-up. You have a plan for how you're going to ride that test. You have a plan for the training. There is nothing, oh, let's see how he feels today. No, not in his world. And that really helped change things for me. And I never saw him fight with a horse the whole time I was there. Never. I would see him do, and he had all these stallions. So when they were being naughty, he'd plant himself on a 20-meter circle, and he'd put them in a little inner flexion with his inner leg, and he'd just wait them out. Sometimes we'd be like, he's still trotting around on the 20-meter, but he'd just wait him out. He really did ride the good into him. So that was also something that for me was really important. And then he long lines and for the Piat Passage stuff too, and that was also familiar because Sue long line. That's how I learned how to long line for Piat Passage, was through Sue, and then he did it as well. And then for me, Kira and Richard are the same and then totally different. So Richard for me is like a biomechanical genius, and he's sort of like, we're all here, and then Richard is like here, and sometimes I understand what he's talking about. Like I would like to be here, but I know I'm not there. I know I'm still here when I'm dealing with him. And but he changed my riding completely. And he, basically when I got to England, I had been showing Grand Prix, and Rosie had done pretty well at Small Tour, and they watched me ride around for a couple days, and they basically said to me that I don't sit well at all, and that I had to change everything to be more effective if I wanted to ride good Grand Prix. And I went, whatever you want. So I ended up on a 20-meter circle for months. I had to go to a horse show to qualify for that 6-year-old test on the other horse. I hadn't been off a 20-meter circle. The horse got a 90. So I qualified for that on a 90. Not going off the circle. And then at one point they told me I wasn't allowed to use my outside rein. I had to turn them, my horses, from my inside, that diagonal leg, outside leg, inside rein. Oh, that was the other thing too. They told me my horses didn't turn because they didn't turn the way that they expected them to turn, because for them, turning is just this. And the horse, the whole body goes upright. And, I was outside rein, inside leg. I'm going to turn, and they don't turn like that there. So that was also another. But it really changed how I thought about stacking horses up and self-carriage. And I realized when I was there for a couple days, because I would watch all the riding as much as I could. I always had to ride at the end of the day. So I'd get my horses out, walked, put them away, and then watch all the riding. And I realized very, very, very quickly that I might have been doing stuff at this level and they were off on this level and I wanted to ride on that level. So I was going to have to do massively change. And then they're creative. So that I appreciate. And what I loved about being there was that Kira was very much what I'd call into the horse training side of it, and Richard was more into the biomechanical side, though he's a horseman. So you got sort of the best of both worlds tag teaming you, and it was it was one of the most wonderful periods and hardest times of my life to change, because I used to feel like I would just start to understand something and get my house of cards built, and they'd come in and go, okay, that's good, wham, let's start over again, and we're going to go up another level, but your foundation isn't good enough, so we're going to rebuild the whole thing. And that was really difficult and really frustrating a lot of time. So it can be very learning and knowing. It's like stumbling along in a dark hallway, and there's a door handle and you're fumbling around looking for it, and the problem is that you just, until you actually grab it and pull it open, you're lost. And that's a lot how this stuff, when you're learning to ride at a high level, or even just in general, it is difficult. So, and kind of what kept me going is I'm just so stubborn, and no, but you have to be just horribly stubborn, and to say, I'm going to figure this out, and I'm going to keep trying different ways of coming at it, and keep trying to listen to them, to figure this out, and not reverting back, right? Because that's what we all do. We just go back to what we know. So, but it was great. And they were just over here, and Richard kicked my butt for a week, and it was fabulous. One point I told him, I'm like, I know I've had this lesson like probably 100 times before, but I might have actually understood it this time. No, but that's really that's the reality of it. That's when you when you're going through a process and learning, oh, now I understand what they're talking about. I thought I did, but you don't know until you know.
Yeah.
But you don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good? Anything else? Yes?
Curious if you have a weekly system of training that you implement each week?
A weekly system?
Or monthly or yearly or?
No, I think you have to look at the horses individually. Yeah. And then you have to really, Rob Hanna, who's Mary Hanna's husband, she's been on the Australian team multiple times. Rob has a great saying, we make plans and horses change them for us. And that's a real truth, right? So I think in the end, what I used to do for myself personally, for my career, and then also for my horses, is I would sort of set these goals. So I'd say, all right, we're here right now, and if I'm working towards a horse show or trying to move up a level, I would do almost like a monthly plan, 3 months, 6 month, year, and then I would adapt it to whatever presented, because they don't stay sound all the time, and stuff happens, or they lose a shoe, and then and have an abscess, and then need 2 weeks off. So you can't just. But no, that's the reality of it. but you have to know where you want to go. So I think that's the thing, is that I try to approach all the horses like every single one of them is getting trained to do International Grand Prix. And then that way I know that that's my standard goal, and that's what I'm thinking about when I'm doing it. And then we just adjust it to what that horse can do. So, yeah. Yes? Nope?
Ready?
Yeah.
More questions?
No? Are you guys done?
End it when you're done.
No, it's fine.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hold on, I'm coming.
What are we doing here?
Linda, you won.
Oh my God, winner, winner. Thank you.
Okay. Nina? Wow.
Congratulations.
Jen Wall.
Thank you.
Diane Hodges. One more, last one. Is it Alexander Dawson?
Oh, I said. Thank you, everyone, for coming.